So I don't necessarily care what people say about the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. I think that they still, even though they did not win their wild card game against the Cleveland Browns, they were still one of the best teams in the NFL last year and were one of the teams that going into the playoffs were considered a Super Bowl threat and a Super Bowl contender. Now I understand that they pretty much laid an egg. Ben Roethlisberger played one of the worst playoff games of his career in that wild card game against the Cleveland Browns. But just going off what their record and what their statistics showed last year, when you consider the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers play in a division where they go against the Ravens and Browns 4 times a year, two teams who both won 11 games last year, and 2 games against the Cincinnati Bengals, who even though they played a majority of the year without Joe Burrow, they're still a competitive young team that's on the rise and is going to be a threat to this division within the next couple of years. So let's go ahead and get into what this team did really well statistically last year. Most of what they did last year really well is their defensive statistics. They were third in passing yards allowed, 11th in rushing yards allowed, second in takeaways, third in points allowed, and first in sacks. They also were first in sacks allowed on the offensive side of the ball, and they were ninth in turnovers and 12th in points. Now, really, statistically, the only thing that this Pittsburgh Steelers team did not do well last year was run the ball. And I would not really put that on the offensive line at all because, like I said, they were first in sacks allowed. I think really the two big statistics that you can really judge your offensive line on is whether or not they are blocking well in the pass game, and statistically that is their sacks allowed, and whether or not they're able to run the ball. And even though they were last in running the ball, like I said, I don't really put that on the offensive line. I don't think their running back room was as good as it's going to be this year. I understand James Conner was there, and I understand that a lot of people like James Conner as a player and the story that he has coming out of Pittsburgh. But I just don't think that he's the kind of running back that some of the guys that they added, or the guy that they added in the draft is. Especially, in the passing game, James Conner is not as strong of a asset as some of the other guys that even were there last year, like Benny Snell. So now going into this year, when they have Benny Snell, when they have Najee Harris, when they have Kalen Ballage, who they also signed from the Los Angeles Chargers, the running game is going to be a lot better this year. And one thing that is important to mention is they were 15th in passing yards, and even though that's not bad, it's about middle of the road. They were 24th in yards per attempt, and they attempted the most passes in the NFL. And if you look at any team that attempted in the top 5 of attempts, they're probably also in the top 5 or 10 in terms of passing yards. So they just were an inefficient passing team last year. And while many people are going to try to put that on Big Ben Roethlisberger, I think really that is attributed to the fact that they couldn't run the ball. And if you can't run the ball, teams are able to key in on your passing game a lot easier. And I think that's kind of what we saw later on in the year when they had their skid. And I understand that if you were a Pittsburgh Steelers fan or if you were just somebody watching this team in general last year, it was a bit shocking to see this offensive side of the ball fall off a cliff the way that it did. But I think we really need to understand that, Ben Roethlisberger came off major elbow surgery the season before last year. The offensive line, even though they played incredible last year, I don't think anyone was going into last year thinking that this offensive line was going to lead the league in least sacks allowed. I don't think we were going to look at this team even in the first place and say that the running back room was great. So just having the worst running game in the NFL, I don't know if it was really necessarily that big of a surprise. Like I said, I don't think James Conner is the most talented running back in the world. So seeing them struggle run the ball, it wasn't that big of a surprise, I think, to me. And I think a lot of Steelers fans didn't really expect this offense to play that great in the first place. Now, the defensive side of the ball, this is the best defense in the NFL, and they really did not lose a lot. If you look at what they lost on the defensive side of the ball, it's inside linebacker Vince Williams. They did lose Bud Dupree, who that is a big loss, but they ended up replacing him later, who I'll talk to you later about who they replaced him with. Corner Mike Hilton, corner Steven Nelson, and safety Sean Davis. Those are some major losses for the defense. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Steven Nelson and Sean Davis are minor losses for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those are big losses. But at the same time, look at who is on this defense. You have TJ Watt. Now you have Melvin Ingram at the other outside linebacker spot because of him replacing Bud Dupree. You still have Stephon Tuitt. You still have Cam Hayward. You still have guys like Tyson Alualu and Chris Wormley on the inside of the defensive line who are going to be just solid pieces. You have Devin Bush and Avery Williamson at that middle linebacker spot who, with that 3-4, they're going to be the two inside linebackers. They still have Joe Hayden on the outside at that corner position who, even though he's never going to get credit for it anymore, he's still a top 15, top 20 corner in the NFL right now. They still have Minkah Fitzpatrick in the back end, who is one of the top 5 safeties in the NFL right now. They still have Terrell Edmunds, who was a top draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers just a few years ago. And if he can emerge as a decent safety alongside Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think that's the reason they let Sean Davis walk, is because they actually believe in Terrell Edmunds. And if he can step up and be a good player for this team, then losing Sean Davis is really not going to be that big of a deal for Pittsburgh. Now, some other guys that they did add to the team, like I said earlier, they did add Najee Harris, who, replacing James Conner, him alongside Kalen Ballage from the Los Angeles Chargers, I think that those two are going to be able to supplement what they lost with James Conner and even more. Like I said, I don't think James Conner was an incredible asset in the passing game for this team, and I don't think that, when you don't have a running back that can catch the ball, that makes it even easier for your offense to be stopped when you're trying to run the ball. Because when James Conner's in the game, he's probably running the ball. He's either running the ball or he's pass blocking. That's really it. Kalen Ballage is not going to be the guy. When you look at this team, you're not going to say, oh, Kalen Ballage, he just ran for 100 yards. Or Kalen Ballage, he had 2 touchdowns. He's not going to be that guy. But he's going to be the guy that he's the third running back on the team behind Benny Snell as well. And he's just going to do what he needs to do when his name is called. I really believe that. With a coach like Mike Tomlin and a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they believe in you, then you have something. That's just kind of how it goes. On the offensive line, they did lose some guys like right tackle Matt Feeler, left tackle Alejandro Villanueva. They lost Marquise Pouncey to retirement. But they did a really good job at, like I said, supplementing what they lost in the offseason. They signed guard Trey Turner. They signed guard Rashad Coward. They signed center BJ Finney. So they did a good job at replacing some of the guys that they did lose. It still is going to be a little bit of a transition for some of these guys at that tackle spot because we're going to see some new names there. But, like I said, this was the best offensive line in the NFL last year in terms of pass blocking. And if they're just a little bit worse, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. They'll still probably be a top 10 pass blocking team in the NFL next year. And it goes without said that the Pittsburgh Steelers, whether you hate them or not, I guarantee that 80% of the people watching this are not Steelers fans and they hate the Pittsburgh Steelers. But you have to admit that they have a really good ability to make some guys that you've never heard of be some of the best players in the NFL. We saw it with Chase Claypool last year. He was one of the best rookie wide receivers in the NFL after probably not a lot of people thought that he was going to have a great year last year. Antonio Brown became, for a short period, the best wide receiver in the NFL after being a 6th-round draft pick out of Central Michigan. They turned Le'Veon Bell into... Le'Veon Bell is what started this whole movement of running backs being able to catch out of the backfield and be ultimate weapons in the passing game. The Pittsburgh Steelers have turned so many players into superstars that going into this season, it should not be a surprise if we see someone out of the running back room, out of the tight end room, out of the wide receiver room, defensive backs, linebackers. There's going to be a star that emerges from Pittsburgh, and it's going to make the team even better than it is at this moment. So last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I said, they went 12-4. They won the AFC North. That is that's probably the hardest thing to do right now in the NFL is win the AFC North. You have 3 teams that won 11-plus games last year, and the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be no joke by the time this year comes around. What are they going to do this year, though? I see them getting second at the best because I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're going to kind of be in the same kind of boat that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were in last year. I'm not saying that they're going to win the Super Bowl, but I'm saying that they're probably not going to be record-wise the best team in the NFL, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were last year. Tampa Bay got second in their division. So I could see them winning 12 games again, but I could also see Baltimore or Cleveland winning 13 games. I could see whatever win total the Pittsburgh Steelers get this year, they're going to lose a game to either Cleveland or Baltimore to put Cleveland/Baltimore above what Pittsburgh does record-wise.
I think a floor for this team, they're going to at least get 9 or 10 wins. I think that's just kind of a given with this team. You have to get a lot of bad things to happen in Pittsburgh for them to not be a good team in the NFL. Even last year, or the year before last year, when they did not have Ben Roethlisberger for a majority of the season, they still went 8-8 because of how good that defense was. So, 12-4 last year, I could see them getting 12 wins again, going 12-5. I could see them going 13-4. If everything goes right for this team, I could see them going 14-3. If they end up with a top 10 offense, if they end up having the best defense in the NFL again, I could see them winning up to 14 games. And I really think in this AFC, they're going to be fighting Kansas City and Buffalo to be the representative in the Super Bowl. I don't know if they have enough offensive firepower to compete really with Buffalo or Kansas City, but with how good that defense is, I would not be surprised to see Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl next year. With all that being said, that's going to be the video for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you didn't, make sure you leave a dislike. Any feedback from you at this point is much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.